Happy Hobbit Day, everybody. Welcome to Hobbit Day 2019. And of course, as has been traditional now, the beginning of our annual fall fundraiser. This is, in fact, our 7th annual fall fundraiser, which is really great. Throughout the year, I really love our community. And I love my favorite thing about the fall fundraiser is the way that it prompts us to kind of stop for a minute and because it's easy to get kind of we get so I know I get so drawn into like the week by week schedule of things, and whether it's whether it's classes for those of you who are taking our MA courses with us, right, and we're going through from week to week and semester to semester, whether it's in our public broadcasts that you're involved and you're walking with me through one of my several different broadcasts through the week, right, as we're walking usually slowly through the Lord of the Rings or through the Silmarillion material and Film, right, or exploring Lotro with Grifflet, or Mythgard Academy, and going from, as we've been marching our way through the history of Middle Earth, plus other wonderful books interspersed along the way. It's really easy to get, sort of next discussion, the next chapter, and then just, or the next paragraph or the next sentence, and you just, kind of keep going and keep moving. It's really great, however, to pause once a year and kind of step back and look at the big picture and appreciate this wonderful community that we have. And I find it really appropriate to always begin doing that on Bilbo and Frodo's birthday. I think about Bilbo's birthday gathering, right? And sort of what that meant. On the one hand, of course, unlike throwing a big, for hobbits, throwing a big birthday party is different, right, than for us throwing a big birthday party. For us, if we throw a big birthday party, I've been to birthday parties for my sons where they were calculating the number of guests based upon how many presents they hoped to receive, right? And that, of course, adds an entirely different dynamic to the whole thing, right? But with Bilbo, of course, it was a chance to celebrate. And you think about his speech and how he's looking back on the life that he has had with them, and his adventures and the life since his adventures, and the adventure, of course, the next adventure that he's looking forward to. And anyway, as I say, I definitely really love to sort of step back and think a little bit about, the things that we do together in this community that we've built together, and to really appreciate the role that you guys have played in all of this. So, think about the weekly broadcasts that I'm doing, right? I've been reflecting on this a little bit over the last couple of weeks in one or two of my broadcasts. I've now been engaged in 4 long-term projects for quite a while now, right? I remember when I first started Riddles in the Dark. That was my first ever really long-term thing, really long-term show. I mean, not just like my podcast as a whole, but like one particular endeavor. And it was, it was a commitment to 3 years. We were going to be thinking through The Hobbit and adaptation of The Hobbit, of course, in conjunction with the Peter Jackson films, as they were going to be released over the course of 3 years. So that was a 3-year commitment when I started doing that. And, in context now, that seems really hilarious, actually, as we've been doing Mythgard Academy now almost every week for 6 years. We're celebrating the 6th year anniversary of the Signum Academy here. Basically, I think the very first one, the Fellowship of the Ring, when I did the Fellowship of the Ring in the Mythgard Academy, was, I believe, late summer of 2013. So it's been 6 full years we've been doing the Mythgard Academy. Film has been going on for, I think, 5 years. We're coming to the end of season 4, but it's not been even exactly a season per year. I think it's going on 5 years that Film has been happening. I've been doing my Grifflet stream now for fully 4 years. In fact, we just passed the 4-year anniversary a couple weeks back. And of course, exploring the Lord of the Rings, the new little one, I've been doing now. We're in the 3rd year for that. We're about 2 3/4 of a year through that. And of course, all of them, none of them are projected to end pretty much ever, right? I mean, all 4 of them are like completely open-ended. And, there's certainly been no diminishment of my enjoyment in any one of those projects as we've been going through week by week and year by year, and no flagging of enthusiasm in the community. Just to me, that's just kind of a little taste of the larger community that we have built through Signum University. And, we've built together, we all have built something really remarkable together. This is really only the beginning of things. So I want to be thinking for a little bit. I want to share with you a reading, and then I'm going to have a couple other people share a couple other wonderful readings as well. And then we'll have just sort of a little bit of discussion for me. What I want to do with my reading is mostly kind of applicability, just sort of share with you. This has been a passage that's been very much on my mind and on my heart over the last 6 months, especially. And I wanted to. So that's why I kind of wanted to share that with you, and we'll kind of talk about things with my other 2 guests later on. We have 2 distinguished Signum alumni actually who are going to be doing readings later on. But let me first talk about our fundraising campaign, because our fundraising campaign, just Signum's fundraising history, is itself such a perfect testimony to the wonderful community that we have at Signum University. I was just recently, again, up in Concord, the state capital of New Hampshire, visiting with legislators and folks at from the Department of Education. I've done that fairly regularly over the course of this past year. And, I was just sort of reflecting again, and by they, I mean people who are used to normally dealing with higher education. They have no idea. They have no idea the kind of community that we have at Signum. The idea of beginning a university from scratch and having it essentially be crowdfunded, made up with small but faithful donations from a wide group of people. This is not normal. This is not the normal pattern. This is not how higher education administrators are used to thinking. This is not the kind of entity that lawmakers are used to dealing with. I just was having a discussion with a couple of the Congress people who kept coming back to the steps that Signum would have to go through in order to qualify for Title IV funding. Title IV funding, of course, in America means the federal student loan programs, right? So that we could collect federal money through the federal student loan programs. And I had to say a couple times, no, we're not. That's not us. We're not doing that. See, they assume that everybody, that's the whole point, right? The whole point of establishing a university is to be able to collect Title IV money from the government, student loan money. That's obviously our end goal, right? And I said, no, that's not. We have no plans to do that. In fact, we have active plans not ever to do that. And you could see there was just puzzlement. There was just like, what's the plan? Then, if that's not the plan, what is the plan? And again, they just there's so many ways in which Signum is setting out to be delightfully different, and this is one of them. The fact that at the core of our existence to this point, at the core of our the sort of the financial stability that we have built over the years, is just the enthusiasm of our community who loves what we do and who believes in what we do. That is what our plan is instead, right? Instead of using horrible federal funding. Anyway, so as I say, I've been just recently reflecting on this a lot and really appreciative about that. Let me show you a little bit about what happened this past year. So you may remember last year, in our fundraising campaign last year, I said that I wanted to raise $60,000 for the annual fund. That was the goal for last year. We came in like just under $60,000 the year before. We were like 59,700 or something like that for the previous year. So I was like, okay, last year I was like, okay, this year, let's do it. We can raise $60,000. So that was our goal, our annual fund goal for last year. Now I should explain that we call it, of course, the annual fund because this is sort of our general fund. This is the fund that we're able to use most flexibly to be able to take care of a number of our any number of our different expenses and stuff. It's a super important fund that really has kept the lights on at Signum for a long time. Of course, it's called the annual fund because it's not just a campaign fund, right? I do the fall fundraising campaign in the fall. Right, I do this period of several weeks in which we talk about Signum's financial needs, and I tell you a little bit about Signum's plans and what we're building, and I ask you for money, to think about donating to Signum stuff, or I ask you for money, because I don't want to be doing that all year round, but of course we need money all year round. Donations that are given at any time during the year all count towards the annual fund. So I certainly don't want people to feel like, especially if you're watching this later or something and you're like, oh man, I missed the campaign, it's too late. Of course, it's never too late to donate to Signum University. Anyway, so our annual fund goal last year was $60,000, a plateau we'd never quite hit in any of our fundraising campaigns before. And our actual giving at the end of the year was $70,661. We exceeded it by $10,000, more than a 15% overage over our initial goal last year. It was absolutely wonderful. We had such a wonderful year last year in the annual fund. It was a banner year for Signum all around. Actually, we had a really strong budgetary year. Our events did really well. Our donations were really strong. The community really rallied around Signum this past year and put us in a stronger place than we've been. We're not used to running any kind of a surplus at Signum. That's what happens when you're a nonprofit, and a real nonprofit. See, I shouldn't use a pejorative distinction like that, but there are a lot of places that I could name, though I won't, who are technically nonprofits, but they're big money and they're using big government money and their administrators are making big bucks, and that's never what Signum has been about. Signum has always been about trying to be as cost effective as we can for everybody, to try to do everything we do to keep costs low, to keep the cost of our events low, to keep the cost of our tuition, of course, primarily as low as we can possibly make it. Just try to do as much good as we can with all of the resources that we have. And anyway, so having a surplus was really wonderful and has enabled us to be in a really strong position for this coming year, stronger than we've been really ever in the history of Signum. That was really cool. Yeah, Brandon, exactly. Brandon says, the NFL, the National Football League in America, is still technically a nonprofit. Yeah, exactly. There are some places that are that are organized officially as a nonprofit, but it's not in fact about which are still primarily in fact about making money. That isn't us. Anyway, so the thing I want to emphasize, especially today, though, of course, as I invite you guys to donate and support Signum University again this year, I want to spotlight today in particular the wonderful and very thoughtful generosity of our monthly donors. We have a large number of people who give on a monthly basis to Signum University. And that has been such a blessing to us. I remember back in the old days when the only income we had was our semesterly tuition. And boy, is it hard to run a startup business when you're getting like a chunk of money 3 times a year and you have to kind of make it work for the 4 months in between when you're earning no money at all. And you're still in your first couple years of operations, and so like new expenses you didn't anticipate are popping up, and you're like, okay, tuition comes in again in 2 months. We'll see about that. Anyway, it was a fun time. It was bracing, but the steady income from monthly donations makes such a big difference, and there are so many people who have been able to make a huge difference for Signum, and I'm going to be talking about that in a little bit. Even if you're only giving a small amount per month, and I'll show you what that looks like. In fact, here's the monthly giving from this past year. So this is the total number of donors we had in these different categories. This is the donations per month here on the left hand side, and the number of donors in each one of these categories, and the total donations that we received from the people in those categories. So you can see we have 108 people total who in this past year gave monthly donations to Signum University. Some of these, of course, were set up like partway through the year, so as you'll see, we didn't necessarily get like 12 months at the donation during the fiscal year of last year and everything. But this is 108 people giving on a monthly basis, and that has made such an amazing difference. When I look back through, I look down this list, right, and I do most of the budgeting and budget review and stuff like that of Signum myself, and so like when I look at these numbers, right, in my mind, I can immediately picture the things in our budget that these people have paid for, right? So I mean, like, let me give you an example. One of the things that we really value at Signum University, one of the things that we want to one way in which we want our academic program to be different from other online programs is we want our students to know that they are part of a community, that they're not just sort of sitting by themselves in a computer in sort of space on their own, that they have colleagues and students. So one of the programs that we have Curtis, the far right column, that's total donations for the year in each one. Yeah, the column on the left is the amount per month. So that's sort of the categories that I broke it down into. Anyway, so one of the programs that we have at Signum are what we call our Signum advisors, where every incoming student is assigned an advisor who, reaches out to them to have a phone call with them and explain, answer any questions about how Signum works. Signum courses are a little bit different than some other courses, and our vocabulary is a little bit different, and so sometimes, people need help getting oriented to how things work, right? So we've got, and they continue to email them and call them and keep up with them. How are things going? How did your courses go last semester? Is there anything I can help with, or anybody is there any of our resources I can connect you to? So we have a team of people who are assigned to all of our students individually, so that we can make sure that people have a point of contact, a point of human contact, from the beginning through to the end of their Signum program, and our donors there at the $15 to $25 level, right? This number right here jumps out at me. That's almost exactly what we paid to our Signum advisors this past year. So if you donated between $15 and $25 this past year, then you help to make that human community at Signum possible. You help to support every one of our students every semester as they went through our program. Another example: if you gave between $50 and $100 a month, there are only 8 people in this category, but for the 8 of you who gave so generously, between $50 and $100 per month, somewhere in that range, that completely paid for our library resources. Subscribing to online journal databases it costs a lot of money. It used to be more than Signum could afford to do. Those 8 people, the donations of those 8 people, paid for our library subscriptions for the year. Basically, that is just awesome. If you take 2 of these, so everyone who donated, all 39 people who donated between $10 and $15 a month during this past year. you guys paid for our online classroom system. So the GoToWebinar system that I'm using right now with our attendees here, this is the same thing we use for our classroom interface in smaller groups. We can have multiple video feeds, and we open up the audio feeds for discussions and things like that. We have multiple licenses of these so that we can have as many different sessions running as we need to for all of our classrooms to happen. And you guys paid for our licensing fees for all of our classrooms for the entire year. And there was some left over, which we could then combine with all of the money that we earned from from the 5 very generous people who gave $100 or more a month. And that enabled us to make all of our video and audio files available to everybody. Of course, you guys know, not only do we have the multiple different podcast feeds with all of those, my programs that I was talking about, but also people, when we have our anytime audits, when we have our class lectures and things, we have to get hard drive space, right? Somebody else's hard drive space, not our hard drives. We don't have them. It would cost us much more to own them. Virtual hard drive space, right, where we store all of our audio video files, and so that we can give them out, most of them for free, right, in our public broadcasting and everything. That is definitely it's a major part of our expenses. It's one of our biggest single lines, certainly of our costs outside of salary. That's one of our biggest costs, and you guys paid for that this past year. You made it so everyone who has listened to a podcast episode, everyone who has downloaded course materials, the experience they had to those folks. And it's just a few examples of the kinds of things. Another way to think about this, we pay our faculty, like our preceptors, the faculty who are working with the groups of students in all of our synchronous classroom sessions for each one of our classes. On average, we paid our preceptors $3,857 per course this past year. And so again, if you think about that, kind of breaking that down into from some of these other different categories, right? The $25 to $50 a month people paid for almost 2 of our about 1.5 of our courses, for the what we paid to our faculty for those courses. So it's just wonderful what you guys have been able to enable us to do. And as you can see, the total for the year, just under $25,000 total. So more than a third of all of the donations we received, we were receiving these monthly donations. And as I say, that is just something, and the faithfulness with which our monthly donors have continued to give month after month and year after year is something that has just really enabled us to not only keep the lights on, but really to thrive. Now, Noam asks, which would be better, one large donation or breaking it into monthly donations? Either is good. Like this, it's not that single donations are an inconvenience or anything like that. That is not at all true, and certainly we welcome donations in any form. The primary thing that I would say is, it is certainly true that monthly donations are helpful. The primary thing that I would say, though, is that the monthly it's a really good way to kind of budget yourself and challenge yourself, right? I mean, if you look at just the left-hand column, right, these are not large numbers, right? You think about what this adds up to on the right-hand side, right? But this is, if you're giving, $15 a month, say you're giving $25 a month, right? So say you set up a donation to give $25 a month. Well, that adds up pretty quickly, right? I mean, that's $300 for the year. For many of us, I know it's kind of hard just to toss off a check for $300, right? But $25 a month is not so bad, and it's much easier to be able to kind of enable your gift to Signum to accumulate over the year that way. So yeah, I mean, Noam, I would say I know that there are many people who do prefer to give in the one single donation, and that's fine. That's a wonderful way to give as well, and if that's the way you prefer, that's totally fine. I'm not trying to persuade anybody to shift over to monthly giving necessarily if the single gift is the way that you prefer. But especially if you're feeling like, well, I don't know how much of a difference I can really afford to make at Signum University, just know that there's a big contribution that's being made even by people who are only giving a very modest amount per month. And it really does add up to something really special at the end of the day. I think that this is, and it certainly does help us with planning, as you suggest, Curtis. It is just from a cash flow point of view, right? For us to be able to be planning things like our payroll and our regular expenses and things, knowing that we have, a certain amount of money that's regularly coming in every month, does make things a lot easier. But yeah. So, for instance, as we look towards this coming fiscal year, for thinking of this current campaign and moving forward into this year, back in the old days, like 2013, 2014 in the first campaigns, right, we'd start off and I'd be like, okay, we're at 0 and let's see how high we can get. We don't start at 0 anymore because of our wonderful monthly donors. Now, technically, our fiscal year began on August 1st. So counting everything, all the donations that we have received, most of them, 98% of them so far coming in through our monthly donors, we have already received $32,262 in gifts and pledges so far. That is counting the monthly donations as a pledge to continue at that pace. Even if everyone just continues at the pace that they are, that's $32,262. As you see, that's significantly higher than the $25,000 we received last year, because many of those monthly donors joined us in mid-year, you see. So having them around for the whole year will bring in a total of $32,262. So that's where we are as of today, right, for our annual fund already. So as I said, our goal was $70,000. We're already almost halfway there, right? Thanks to our monthly donors. And of course, as individual gifts come in, that number will start to rise. Let me show you one last number thing. And that's just a side-by-side comparison. The fiscal year 20 numbers are as of right now. The people whose monthly donations are currently on the books and projecting those monthly donations forward through this coming fiscal year, what that would amount to. Just again, sort of show you how this breaks down and how this really begins to add up as we go through. You can see we've already had some increases even since last year on many of these categories, and I would. Again, it would have an enormous impact for Signum just to increase some of these lower numbers, right? For people who, maybe you've been donating $10 a year and you might think about increasing that to $15 a year, right? $5 a month, not such a huge difference, right? But you can see how, although we have 40 people projecting to bring in $5,200, only 24 people are projected to bring in more than that, right? So again, it's the percentage increase gets very significant. All this stuff really adds up, and again, you would be surprised at the kind of impact that even these kinds of modest monthly donations really can have. Michelle, if you've done a previous monthly donation, it will continue. And if you wanted to increase, all you have to do, you can arrange to cancel. You can start a new one and then arrange to cancel the old one, so that you don't have to have like 2 going at once or whatever. That can get confusing. So there's no need to do that. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely, and there's certainly room here on the upper end and everything as well. Like I said, I really I encourage you to think about it. Signum University is, there's so much that we are planning to do. From what I have seen, and certainly what I personally have experienced, Signum University has made a really big impact on people's lives so far, and there is much more that we're planning to do. I look forward to telling you about that a little bit more later on in the campaign in my annual State of the University address. Anyway, it's going to be really exciting, and I am so glad to have you guys along with me for that. Let me use that actually as a transition to the Tolkien passage I wanted to read with you guys today. It'll be a very familiar one. I didn't choose an obscure passage, but as I said, one that I keep coming back to in my own head for a couple different reasons, as I'll explain. First, let me show you something that I'm going to be talking about a lot more in the State of the University address. Signum University has been growing a lot. Has been growing a lot in fact over the last couple years, and has been growing even more in concept, especially over the last 6 months or so, as we've been planning our next adventure. Last year, you'll remember the theme of the campaign was on the doorstep, right? As we were really on the edge of, as I was telling you guys last year, like we are on the edge of big things, right? Anyway, so many different ways in which that was applicable last year. This year, we are passing through that door, right? And we as an institution are going out, and we're inviting you all to come out the door with us and come on the adventure with us. And I'll tell you a little bit more, as I say, about exactly what that adventure is. But the image I keep coming back to is this image of the tree. Remember the tree that I did? I think it was 2 years ago. I introduced the little Signum tree graphic that we did with, the Mythgard branch, right? And it was this little tree with like a little sticky trunk and two little branches, right? That was a couple years ago, and so here it is on the left. Here's the one that we did back in 2017. Here's the Signum tree now, and as I said, I'm going to talk a lot more about that. The tree is maturing significantly, growing into a much more significant tree, a much larger tree with a broader canopy, and a taller tree with whole new networks of branches. I'm going to be, as I say, I'm going to tell you more about that, especially this one up here with the question marks. That in particular, I'll be talking about more during my State of the University address later on. But this for me is not only, a cute graphic. This is not just a visualization, right? This is not just a visual aid to try to help you picture how Signum University is organized, which is how it started, right? For me, this is well, by now I'm sure you've probably guessed the passage that I want to read to you, because the passage I want to read to you is the beginning of Leaf by Niggle. Well, a bit from the beginning and then a bit from the middle. So I'm just going to read my passage, and then I'll talk about it and some of the ways in which why this has really been so particularly on my heart over the last few months especially. There once was a little man called Niggle, who had a long journey to make. He did not want to go. Indeed, the whole idea was distasteful to him, but he could not get out of it. He knew he would have to start sometime, but he did not hurry with his preparations. Sorry. Messed up my... Okay. Niggle was a painter. Not a very successful one, partly because he had many other things to do. Most of these things he thought were a nuisance, but he did them fairly well when he could not get out of them, which, in his opinion, was far too often. The laws in his country were rather strict. There were other hindrances, too. For one thing, he was sometimes just idle. and did nothing at all. For another, he was kind-hearted in a way. You know the sort of kind heart. It made him uncomfortable more often than it made him do anything, and even when he did anything, it did not prevent him from grumbling, losing his temper, and swearing, mostly to himself. All the same, it did land him in a good many odd jobs for his neighbor, Mr. Parrish, a man with a lame leg. Occasionally, he even helped other people from further off, if they came and asked him to. Also, now and again, he remembered his journey, and began to pack a few things in an ineffectual way. At such times, he did not paint very much. He had a number of pictures on hand. Most of them were too large and ambitious for his skill. He was the sort of painter who can paint leaves better than trees. He used to spend a long time on a single leaf, trying to catch its shape and its sheen and the glistening of dewdrops on its edges. Yet he wanted to paint a whole tree, with all of its leaves in the same style and all of them different. There was one picture in particular which bothered him. It had begun with a leaf caught in the wind, and it became a tree, and the tree grew, sending out innumerable branches and thrusting out the most fantastic roots. Strange birds came and settled on the twigs and had to be attended to. Then all round the tree and behind it, through the gaps in the leaves and boughs, a country began to open out, and there were glimpses of a forest marching over the land and of mountains tipped with snow. Niggle lost interest in his other pictures, or else he took them and tacked them onto the edges of his great picture. Soon the canvas became so large that he had to get a ladder, and he ran up and down it, putting in a touch here and rubbing out a patch there. When people came to call, he seemed polite enough, though he fiddled a little with the pencils on his desk. He listened to what they said, but underneath he was thinking all the time about his big canvas in the tall shed that had been built for it out in his garden, on a plot where once he had grown potatoes. So that's the first section. Now, of course, I want to read the second section when he meets the tree. So this is after he's been to the workhouse and he's been sent on to some easier treatment, right? Niggle pushed open the gate, jumped on the bicycle, and went bowling downhill in the spring sunshine. Before long, he found that the path on which he had started had disappeared, and the bicycle was rolling over a marvelous turf. It was green and close, and yet he could see every blade distinctly. He seemed to remember having seen or dreamed of that sweep of grass somewhere or other. The curves of the land were familiar somehow. Yes, the ground was becoming level, as it should, and now, of course, it was beginning to rise again. A great green shadow came between him and the sun. Niggle looked up and fell off his bicycle. Before him stood the tree, his tree, finished. If you can say that of a tree that was alive, its leaves opening, its branches growing and bending in the wind that Niggle had so often felt or guessed and had so often failed to catch. He gazed at the tree, and slowly he lifted his arms and opened them wide. "It's a gift," he said. He was referring to his art, and also to the result, but he was using the word quite literally. He went on looking at the tree. All the leaves he had ever labored at were there, as he had imagined them rather than as he had made them, and there were others that had only budded in his mind, and many that might have budded, if only he had had time. Nothing was written on them, they were just exquisite leaves, yet they were dated as clear as a calendar. Some of the most beautiful, and the most characteristic, the most perfect examples of the Niggle style, were seen to have been produced in collaboration with Mr. Parrish. There was no other way of putting it. The birds were building in the tree. Astonishing birds! How they sang! They were mating, hatching, growing wings, and flying away singing into the forest, even while he looked at them. For now he saw that the forest was there too, opening out on either side and marching away into the distance. The mountains were glimmering far away. Okay, so there are several different reasons why I've been thinking of this passage a lot lately. One is simply because, one in the sort of the least personal, but one of the things in my own thoughts about Tolkien and discussions of Tolkien that I've been having over the last year, I've really been thinking a lot more about Tolkien's writing process, right? And in particular, or perhaps a better way of saying that, is I've been reflecting a lot more on all the things that I've learned about Tolkien's writing process, especially through the Mythgard Academy series, as we've been reading through the history of Middle-earth together. And in particular, the kind of immersion we had been doing into Tolkien's writing process as we read through the history of the Lord of the Rings, the Return of the Shadow, the Treason of Isengard, and the War of the Ring, and the beginning of Sauron Defeated, which we're still in the middle of right now. And of course, like this idea, his description of Niggle the painter, and the way in which he's not inventing the tree, right? That he is discovering the tree. And the whole tone of voice of that initial description of his beginning to paint the tree, right? When he keeps saying things like, the tree grew, sending out innumerable branches and thrusting out the most fantastic roots. It's like Niggle's not even involved in that process. It's something that the tree itself is doing. Birds come in and have to be attended to, right? All that kind, he begins to catch glimpses of the countryside between the branches, right? It's like he's not doing it. He's not inventing. He's discovering. He is just the vehicle of this thing that's happening, right? But then notice when he meets the tree at the end, he's aware consciously of both things. On the one hand, he's even more aware of how independent the tree is, right? How independent it is of him. Think of the birds, right? The reference to the birds. The birds in the initial description came in and had to be attended to, he tells us, right? But when he sees the tree, he finds the birds building nests in it, right? And he's astonished by the birds, how they sang, and they're mating, hatching, growing wings, and flying away into the forest, right? They're living lives totally independent of him, right? So there are several ways in which he is impressed even more by the fact that this is a living thing. It is on its own. I am not its maker, right? But at the same time, he also can see simultaneously that he was, in fact, directly involved. And that's that it is sort of owing to him. The tree is in his style, right? He knows exactly everything about the tree. He can see the characteristics, the different leaves on it, which are the exact characteristic Niggle style of leaf, right? So those two things are, and again, and just as I say, I keep in my mind, I have kept in my mind coming back to this passage as we've been looking at how Tolkien thinks and how Tolkien writes. And there's more that we can see. It's not that. This, of course, Leaf by Niggle, is what I mean by this. Is certainly one of the most autobiographical things that Tolkien ever wrote. It's not just about himself, but it is certainly very heavily informed by his own experiences as well as his own uncertainties and anxieties and desires for his own work, for the Lord of the Rings in particular. But I think even more than just the Lord of the Rings, I think it's really the whole thing. A lot of times people will say, like, oh yeah, like the tree is basically the Lord of the Rings, or it's his anxiety about the Lord of the Rings, and is the Lord of the Rings ever going to be published? Which is is what's kind of informing Leaf by Niggle. But on the other hand, I think there's much more to it than that, right? I mean, the whole idea of the tree and the kind of unified nature of the tree, right, and how everything is all. I think it's much more generally his entire creative world that he's talking about. I mean, I certainly think that the Silmarillion and the Lord of the Rings stuff and everything is all really tied in here together when he's thinking about this. Anyway, for me personally, you can probably guess and see why I've been thinking about this also myself, and have been finding much more autobiographical relevance to myself from Leaf by Niggle than I ever have before. I've always loved it, and I've always appreciated it. Mostly, especially because of the way that it gives us some insights, not only into Tolkien's artistic processes, which it really does, but into his own heart, into his own desires, into his own values, into his own concerns and hopes, very personal concerns and hopes, and self-assessments and things. So I've always found Leaf by Niggle very touching in that way. But I have to admit that I never really connected it much with myself. That is, I never really applied it to my own life directly. Again, when I was reading it, I was thinking about Tolkien, and when I was learning from it, I was learning about Tolkien, because I've never been an artist like Tolkien is, right? I've never had a story like Tolkien had. That was never me, right? But I have kept coming back to this, especially over this past year, as you know, this past year for me has been one of, again, the theme last year was on the doorstep, right? And I think at the time, you know, it was last September when I decided that was going to be the theme of our campaign last year. And I really had no idea exactly how applicable that was, right? And it's, you know, we meant it in a couple different senses. We meant, you know, that it was, on the one hand, you know, Signum University brings people to the doorstep to invite them in, right, to our home and to our community, serving as a door to enable people to go out and experience things that they you know aren't able to experience elsewhere. But also for me, it was about our journey at Signum University, and that sense, as I said, that I had that we were on the threshold. Right, that we were getting ready to cross a threshold and to do some exciting things. And this year, one way to think about it is that I began the year thinking that I had best come up with some plans. I had best make some. It was time for me to make some plans. Right, I needed to figure out the directions in which Signum needed to go, right? Where our, you know, next journey would take us. And that didn't work out very well. That is, I don't feel like it worked out very well. But then the tree started to grow, right? And again, I think back to the history of the Lord of the Rings. You look at these moments, you know, there are two moments that really jump out from my experience of discussing through in Mythgard Academy with you guys on the history of the Lord of the Rings. The first one, of course, is a very famous one, but it's certainly worth revisiting. And that's when the Black Rider comes in, right? Here's Tolkien. In Chapter 2 of the Hobbit sequel, he's already written Chapter 1 like 5 times. And he's in Chapter 2 of the Hobbit sequel, trying to satisfy his publisher, instead of doing what he really wants to do, which is continue trying to prepare the Silmarillion for publication, because in the wake of the success and fame of the Hobbit, that's what he really wants to do. So instead of doing that, he's sitting down and trying to, he's trying to come up with a story, right? He's trying to make a plan for what this sequel should be, and he doesn't know. He has no clear idea. He has no clear vision of what this story is going to be. All he's got is a funny, like the long expected party, right? He's got a birthday party, at which some funny things are going to happen, and then there's going to be a prank at the end, and then in Chapter 2 there's going to be a journey they're setting out, but he has no idea where they're going or even really why they're going. And then, of course, and so as long as he is just like trying to make up a story, he's spinning his wheels. He keeps rewriting. He has no plan, right? And then one day it thrusts out a branch of its own, right? He comes to that very, very memorable scene, right? The scene which is the genesis of the entire Lord of the Rings project, which is the one when the hobbits, the three hobbits, whose names are not the same as the three hobbits in the published text, are walking along the road and they hear horse hooves behind them and they hide off to the side of the path to give a surprise to the person who's coming up, to Gandalf, who they think is coming up behind them, right? And then this rider appears, and of course at first it is Gandalf, and this is going to be apparently another in the series of, you know, sort of fun hobbit jokes and things, like the party, right, and the prank pulled off at the party. And instead, of course, as he's revising, he changed white horse, and he crosses white out and he says black horse, and then he describes this black figure who is on the horse, and the sniffing, which was at first Gandalf, because that was going to be funny, that he identified the hobbits by smell, right? I think that was a body odor joke, but anyway, he was going to identify the hobbits by smell, and that was going to be comical. And instead of being comical, it becomes really ominous, right? And now all of a sudden, there's this antagonist in the road, this really creepy, faceless guy on a black horse, and Tolkien has no idea who that is or what have you. You know, he begins, instead of inventing, he suddenly discovers something, and that discovery leads to more discoveries, and all of a sudden you have, and from that comes directly, Bilbo's invisibility ring is actually the ring of power, and the entire story is born, right? The other example is Treebeard, right? He wanted to have a giant that is, you know, a normal giant, like a Jack and the Beanstalk giant, a giant antagonist, because giants are cool. And so he was going to have a giant. He was going to call the giant Treebeard because, like, that's cool. That's a good name for a giant. Because, you know, he has a beard and he's as tall as a tree, and so it's all good. And so he has various ideas for how this monstrous giant Treebeard, again, who is not an ent, he was just a giant, you know, the kind of the role that Treebeard was going to play and everything, and even wrote a couple of those at various points in the story. And of course, as you know, if you have listened to the classes, the phrase for giant that Tolkien used, it was treemen, right? That's what Ted Sandyman and Sam are talking about at the beginning of chapter 2 in The Green Dragon. What about these giants, these treemen, as they're called, by which they mean men as big as trees, as tall as trees, giants. But then he has the moment when Merry and Pippin arrive at Fangor, and he has the moment when he discovers, wait a second, Treebeard is not the name of a Jack and the Beanstalk giant. Treebeard is a tree man, really a tree man, and he discovers the concept of ents, right? And as soon as he does, you know, he had all this sketchy stuff. These, you know, he had been, when he was trying to invent and figure out a way to get giants into the story, because that was a cool idea and he wanted to use that, right? It didn't go anywhere. But when he began discovering instead of inventing, all of a sudden in chapter 4 of book 3, the Treebeard chapter of the Two Towers, wrote itself almost exactly in one draft. I mean, you know, Christopher Tolkien shows us the, you know, a bunch of the original drafts of that, and he was like, yeah, I mean, almost without revision, that chapter just emerged in one, like in what looks like almost one sitting, once he started discovering things. Anyway, as I say, this is something that has been my own experience too here over the last 3 to 6 months, especially when I was, you know, laboring to try to figure out, like, okay, so what are the next steps? What are the next steps that Signum needs to take? What are the directions that we need to be going now that we're you know, in the middle of and getting ready to move beyond the credentialing point? Where are the next stages? You know, what are the directions that Signum needs to grow? And you know, over the last 3 to 6 months, I've suddenly sort of discovered things, and like Tolkien discovering the Black Riders, like Tolkien discovering Treebeard and the Ents. And I have just been watching this tree unfolding and taking on well, not taking on this life. It always had life, right? It's just I finally discovered it. And I have continued to go back to these passages, as I read it through, now this passage that I never saw myself in, but only really appreciated because I could see Tolkien through them, through these passages. Now all of a sudden, really have this like almost allegorical applicability to my life and situation, and to Signum as the tree, and it's been really, really fun to see that. Leaf by Niggle was already my favorite of Tolkien's short stories, one of my favorite Tolkien things, full stop. And it has been really special to have it kind of overlaid with this, to kind of begin to sort of to see and discover my own self. It sort of makes me laugh at myself even. Those of you who listen to Exploring the Lord of the Rings, might recognize the relevance to me, and somebody who is better at painting leaves than trees, right? And who has a fantasy about painting a whole tree with like each leaf individually realized and everything. And I'm like, yeah, okay, maybe I had more in common with Tolkien than I thought I did. Anyway, I'd love to hear from you guys thoughts about Leaf by Niggle, and about thoughts about Leaf by Niggle, thoughts about your own sort of experiences and thoughts and reactions to Tolkien, times when you have kind of felt like this too. I'd be very interested to hear your own responses to Leaf by Niggle as well. Of course, for me, Signum is certainly my tree. My tree painting, and I've been running up and down the ladder quite a bit lately, trying to put touches here and there, and I've certainly been tacking on, all of my lesser works sort of around the edge of it in various ways. Of course, if you think about the relationship between the Tolkien Professor podcast and Signum University, it's really kind of like that, right? Tolkien Professor, my podcast, my teaching significantly predates Signum, but is something that I have attached around the edge of that canvas as the years have gone by. Well, I wanted to do two things. Now, first, I always love doing drawings and giving stuff away during campaign broadcasts, so I want to do that. I want to do that here too. So first, before we go on, I want to do a giveaway to folks that are here, and I will include both the GoToWebinar participants and also the folks who are here on the Twitch page as well. And I'm going to do a drawing for an anytime audit tuition for our Beyond Middle Earth class. So I'm just choosing themed based on the reading that I just did. So I'm going to give away an anytime audit to Beyond Middle Earth. And by the way, if you win and you have Beyond Middle Earth, then you can get another one of your choosing instead. So let me do my drawing here. Let's see. Okay. All right. Got to get my dice, of course. Can't do a drawing without dice. That wouldn't be proper. So let me do my quick drawing. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do the drawing, and the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to let's see, here we go. All right. Okay. And okay. The winner is, let's see. One of the people on the Twitch chat. So it is Alfred Judocus 817. Not sure how to pronounce that. If you send an email, so you should send an email to donate at signumu.org, the email address, donate@signumu.org. Send us an email, and we will get you hooked up with your Beyond Middle-earth Anytime audit session. There we go. Yeah, very good. Yeah, Elise, I too, I've been trying to learn about that, about, to let your ideas and whether you're writing a book, whether you're planning something, just kind of let things flow organically rather than forcing it when you think it needs to be done. There's a lot of times that I have found that super useful, and it always makes me think of Leaf by Niggle too. And Curtis, I agree with you that the idea of the idea in Leaf by Niggle is that discovery is also creation. Yes, exactly. It's not merely that there's a muse feeding some Platonic ideal to the artist for which he then becomes a conduit. The discovery itself brings the thing into being. Yeah, exactly. And that's why I wanted to read both halves of that, right? Both when he's there at his canvas and sort of discovering this thing. So he's there at the canvas, of course, very aware of the fact that this is his painting, right? But also while he's doing it, he's aware that he's discovering it, right? And he's describing it like it's a discovery, not an invention. And then when he gets to it and he's standing in front of it and he's really, really aware that it's something outside him because it's outside him, right? He's standing there under its shadow, and yet he's very, very aware that it is in fact it was in fact brought into being by him, right? Yes, and so kind of balancing both of those. For me, it is one of the other ways in which I've been kind of applying Leaf by Niggle in my own life. Really, is both that sense of artistic discovery, but also that sort of responsibility, and that knowing that. That when you are, it's one of the things that has really kind of kept me going at Signum over the years. And we're now, when we do the fall campaign, it's also sort of the unofficial birthday party of Signum as well. Signum is now 8 years old, and over the last 8 years, it's certainly been one of those things that has been keeping me going, is knowing that although sometimes I feel like this is something that has grown completely beyond my intentions and certainly beyond my expectations, but that it is also something that is from me, is something that is Curtis, as you say, I've not only been called just to be like the conduit of it, right? I mean, it is something that I am shaping, that I am bringing into being, and the combination of embracing the responsibility of that while also remembering that it's not just something I can sit down and do and make up on my own is are for me really kind of the two sides of that. Oh, cool. Caleb says that he's doing a Middlemoot session dealing with Tolkien's writing technique and how it works counter to a lot of normal writing theory. Cool. Yeah, I really look forward to that session, Caleb. In a little under a month. Very cool. Oh, cool. And Jamie is talking about her New England Moot presentation. She's making... Oh, right. That's right, Jamie. I remember you talking about this. Jamie is making a Tolkien quilt, which she is going to display at New England Moot. Yeah, she says sometimes it's very frustrating, but the final product becomes more amazing as she allows, the product itself to kind of develop on its own. Yeah, absolutely. There's really something amazing about that. Yeah, cool. All right. Well, let me move. So wait, we're going to do two other readings as well. I wanted to let two other people share. And I'm going to bring in our first alumni guest, the inestimable Sparrow Alden. Sparrow, I think I just unmuted you. Can you hear me here?
Yes, I can hear you just fine. I'm going to put in my earbuds so nothing strange happens.
Good. Yeah, I'm going to put I just realized I didn't have my earphones in either. Let me do that.
There we go. Well, welcome from the far corner, not that far, not in the corner of New Hampshire.
That's right.
On a beautiful last day of summer, and congratulations on another Hobbit reading day.
Yeah.
And exciting fundraiser, all that good stuff.
Very good. Very good. Yeah. No, and thank you for joining us, Sparrow. Always fun to be joined by my fellow New Hampshire resident, and I feel lucky to be sharing the state with you, Sparrow. That is always nice to be able to see you. And you're going to be able to come to New England Moot too, right? I
sure will.
Absolutely.
I can't wait to see what Jamie's going to show us.
That's right.
And do you want me to webcam? Is that a thing I should do?
Sure. Yeah. What's webcam? Hang on a second. Let me change a thing here. I'm gonna upgrade you. Oh, there you are. Okay. Now you should be webcamable.
Fantastic. I will click the little webcam button.
There we go.
There we go.
And there we are. Excellent. And you are going to be reading from A Wizard of Earthsea by Ursula Le Guin, which happens to be the next book that we're going to be talking about in the Mythgard. It's the winner of the recent election in the Mythgard Academy.
Right. I'm very excited.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very good.
Ready to read, or would folks like to read along with me and have my screen, because I'm using my Kindle book?
Why don't you just read? Why don't you just read? That'll be easiest.
Fantastic. That illustration is amazing. Do you
Isn't
know
that cool?
What year publication was that?
I don't know, actually. I'm not sure.
It looks pretty 70s to me.
Come to me too. We'll see.
All right, doggies, it's okay. I'm talking to someone who's inside the computer. Okay,
Sharon says that's the first edition cover.
Wow.
Yeah.
Love it. All right, I would like very much to read from chapter 3 when Sparrowhawk first gets to the College of Magic.
Okay.
And because it's the start of the school year, and I've got all that beautiful energy happening in every part of my life and in the community. So here I am in chapter 3, the School for Wizards. In the great building near one corner, there was a mean little door of wood. Ged went to this and knocked loud. To the old man who opened the door, he said, I bear a letter from the mage Ogion of Gaunt to the warder of the school on this island. I want to find the warder, but I will not hear more riddles and scoffing. This is the school, said the old man mildly. I am the doorkeeper. Enter if you can. Ged stepped forward. It seemed to him that he had passed through the doorway, yet he stood outside on the pavement where he had stood before. Once more he stepped forward, and once more he remained standing outside the door. The doorkeeper inside watched him with mild eyes. Ged was not so much baffled as angry, for this seemed like a further mockery to him. With voice and hand he made the opening spell, which his aunt had taught him long ago. It was the prize among all her stock of spells, and he wove it well now. But it was only a witch's charm, and the power that held this doorway was not moved at all. When that failed, Ged stood a long while there on the pavement. At last, he looked at the old man who waited inside. I cannot enter, he said unwillingly, unless you help me. The doorkeeper answered, Say your name. Then again Ged stood still a while, for a man never speaks his own name aloud until more than his life's safety is at stake. I am Ged, he said aloud. Stepping forward, then he entered the open doorway, yet it seemed to him that though the light was behind him, a shadow followed in at his heels. He saw also, as he turned, that the doorway through which he had come was not plain wood as he had thought, but ivory, without joint or seam. It was cut, as he knew later, from a tooth of the great dragon. The door that the old man closed behind him was of polished horn, through which the daylight shone dimly, and on its inner face was carved the 1,000-leaved tree. Welcome to this house, lad, the doorkeeper said. and without saying more led him through halls and corridors to an open court far inside the walls of the building. The court was partly paved with stone, but was roofless, and on a grass plot a fountain played under young trees in the sunlight. There Ged waited alone some while. He stood still, and his heart beat hard, for it seemed to him that he felt presences and powers at work unseen about him here, and he knew that this place was built not only of stone, but of magic, stronger than stone. He stood in the innermost room of the House of the Wise, and it was open to the sky. Then suddenly he was aware of a man clothed in white who watched him through the falling water of the mountain. As their eyes met, a bird sang aloud in the branches of the tree. In that moment, Ged understood the singing of the bird and the language of the water falling in the basin of the fountain and the shape of the clouds and the beginning and end of the wind that stirred the leaves. It seemed to him that he himself was a word spoken by the sunlight. And then that moment passed. He and the world were as before, or almost as before. He went forward to kneel before the Archmage, holding out to him the letter written by Ogion. The Archmage Nemerly, warder of Roke, was an old man, older, it was said, than any man then living. His voice quavered like the bird's voice when he spoke, welcoming Ged kindly. His hair and beard and robe were white, and he seemed as if all darkness and heaviness had been leached out of him by the slow usage of the years, leaving him white and worn as driftwood that has been a century adrift. My eyes are old. I cannot read what your master writes, he said in his quavering voice. Read me the letter, lad. So Ged made out and read aloud the writing, which was in Hardic runes, and said no more than this. Lord Nemerly, I send you one who will be greatest of the wizards of Gaunt, if the wind blow true. This was not signed with Ogion's true name, which Ged had never learned, but with Ogion's rune, the closed mouth. He who holds the earthquake on a leash has sent you, for which be doubly welcome. Young Ogion was dear to me when he came here from Gaunt. Now tell me of the seas and portents of your voyage, lad. A fair passage, lord, but for the storm yesterday. What ship brought you here? Shadow, trading from the Andrades. Whose will sent you here? My own. Isn't that marvelous?
It really is.
You're right. There's and I could go on and read the entire book out loud because it's so seamless. Yeah. We're about to meet wonderful people, but whose will sent you here? My own. And we run past probably 8 things in the last 4 pages that turn out to be important motifs throughout the whole story. Mm-hmm. Love it. And right now, in the Modern Fantasy 1 course, we are wrapping up our study of A Wizard of Earthsea. And so I am ready to ask you questions and tell you my thoughts, and because the start of a new school year is an amazing thing.
Absolutely. I love that there's so much. I can't wait to dig into Wizard of Earthsea again. It's been a while since I have, and it's as always, whenever I'm reading Le Guin, it is just like the fireworks constantly going up with like all of the things that are happening at the same time, right? And I'm just like listening to you read, and I'm finding myself being like, words and names and whoa.
could you just see it? And her writing itself, it's so easy to read that it sounds simple to write.
Yeah.
Because it just flows, and these are straightforward sentences, and they bring in shadow and delusion and what it's like to be 14 and away from home, and
yeah.
And then I think to myself, and maybe this is the teacher perspective, and another several dozen 14-year-old boys were arriving that whole week.
Right.
And the poor doorkeeper is making each one of them have their own unique experience of arriving. How amazing.
Right. Yeah. That is awesome. Another really, so much to do in that passage and with that passage. Both thinking about moments, whether they're the regular moments like the beginning of every school year, right, or that kind of a beginning of a the whole seasonal shift, right, with like when everything is new, everything is the same and yet everything is new, right, and there's so many times we can come back to that, or thinking back to being 14, thinking back to those like life moments of passing through gates, and important gates like that. But then, just the way that resonates through the ideas that are all bubbling through that passage about, words, things, and names, and ourselves, and our relation, and the connection between us and other people and other things, and all of these things, right?
And the fact it is so touching to me personally that the only way to get into school, the only way to take the next step on your dream, after you've been frustrated by all the crazy people in the town who don't give real directions, and you're at this little door that looks like they might feed you a greasy burger in the back of an alley, because of course there's illusion everywhere. The only way to move into school is to trust someone you've never met with the name of your soul.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And you've just left home for the first time, and you're not supposed to trust strangers. And
yeah.
I'm just going to fan myself here. It's great.
Yeah.
But it's brilliant. And of course, there's a mirror scene nearer the end of the book that I will, no spoilers, because some of your folks are about to read this, maybe even for the first time. Folks, if you are about to read this for the first time, you are in for such a treat, and just let it carry you. Let it carry you. The names of the islands, the names of the ship. And I know that many people do, that Ursula K. Le Guin's father, the famous anthropologist, and so this woman developed cultures and names and traditions like Tolkien could invent languages.
Right.
I don't know if she did this kind of invention as a kid, but it would not surprise me at all, because it sounds like a really fun thing to do.
Right. Yeah.
Now, my class had a question that was, well, but what does Corey really think? And that I'll tell you my answer, and you tell me how close I was.
Okay.
The question was, but what does Corey really think about the relationship between Ged and the Shadow? Okay, so here's my answer, is that as a good teacher, Corey knows that his opinion doesn't matter to the class, for the class moving forward. Did I?
Well, yeah. I mean, certainly. I would hate to answer that question, especially sort of at this point, right? Yeah. No, it's. I mean, we'll see. I will have some. I'm sure as I'm going through it in Mythgard Academy, and it's been several years since I taught through it before in Modern Fantasy 1, and I'm excited to come back to it and see.
It was 2012. You were baby face.
I was. Wow.
We were just getting things going.
I probably had noticeably more hair then.
You did actually, but not on the
not on the chin. Yeah, exactly.
It was my second course ever at that point Mythgard Institute, and now Signum University. So it was wonderful. It was summer reading.
Yeah,
it was perfectly timed.
Absolutely.
So good luck and have a wonderful adventure in your Mythgard Academy version of it.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. I'm excited for that. We're probably going to be starting that in like November. Beginning of November is when we're going to be. We're finishing up Sound Defeated now. We're just finishing the Notion Club papers, which has been mind blowing.
Good.
And and then we're going to do the Drowning of Andunia, and then we're going to move on to Wizard of Earthsea. So November probably. We're going to and probably November and December. We'll be studying it. So, yeah, it's going to be it's going to be great. And there are several people who are testifying to the fact that they will in fact be reading it for the first time as we're discussing it. So you win. Exactly.
You win. You're going to be head over heels, and then you're going to read all the sequels, and then you'll still be head over heels. It's wonderful.
Yeah. No, it's gonna be super exciting. So thank you, Sparrow, for joining us. So I'm gonna do another giveaway because we're gonna give away an anytime audit of Modern Fantasy 1, so that people can just in honor of that. Oh, and by the way, so Druid's Fire was telling me that the person who won the first drawing is probably not a person. So I'm going to move to the next person on the list instead. Excellent. Angel of Light on Twitch. Angel of Light. Yes, we don't want to give it to a bot. We want to give it to a person. So, Angel of Light, you are the winner of the Beyond Middle Earth. So again, email donate at signumu.org, and we will connect you with that. And let me roll for the winner of the Modern Fantasy 1 drawing. Okay, and that is I've got so many windows open, I've lost them. Hang on. Oh, there it is. Found my attendees window. Okay. Okay. Oh, hang on. Whoa.
Take it down.
Sorry. Okay. It is, let's see, Richard Albert. Richard Albert is the winner of our Modern Fantasy 1 drawing. Congratulations, Richard. Yes. Now, Noam and Brandon are both giving me grief for being prejudiced against bots and depriving them of the benefits of literary analysis. Except I have to differ that I'm not sure bots are people too, but maybe that's maybe we can have that discussion at a later time, in the context
We might have to watch Star Trek Next Generation, The Measure of a Man.
We might have to read some Asimov, perhaps, and then have the discussion, this discussion. Yeah, I think that's...
And I'm happy to say that, of course, bots are welcome at the Mythgard Academy free to the public.
Absolutely.
Events.
Absolutely.
Are they not?
Yes.
Of course they are.
Doors are open. Absolutely. Absolutely. So,
may I tell you my recent adventure? Speaking of adventures.
Yeah.
For my 55th birthday in August, I published my first Kindle book.
That's right. I've been very excited. I was hoping that maybe you would be willing to read one of your poems for us.
I would love to do that. Hold on while I open things up. How fun. The book is set up, it's poetry, and it's set up as a book of days. And I know that if I make a promise to myself, like, I'm going to write every single day forever, that's not going to work. So I've set myself goals of doing chunks of the year. Okay. And the first book is a poem a day, sort of, I walk the dogs and the words start flowing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a meditation from the autumn equinox until Samhain, which is the evening of November.
Right.
In the Celtic calendar. It's the end of the old year and an excellent time for contemplating.
Yeah.
So, may I read to you the poem from October 20th?
Yes. Yes.
All right, here we go. I've been given the gift of perfect days. I wrestle with thoughts like deserve and chance, if chance you call it. Balance. Again, it comes to balance. Spend the days by giving them back, rolling up sleeves, doing good as I know it. Savor the days with deep breaths and open, grateful heart. Easier to give than to receive. Maybe better? Silly old culture. Without receiving, I have less and less to give until I am empty. But when I drink in this gorgeous gift of days, wait, just today, I will cherish today. Focus on today, love today, all it deserves. When I drink in this gorgeous gift of today, then I'm full and just over the brim, barely held in check by surface tension. Receive, give, accept, act. Breathe in, breathe out. The days are air, water, moving. I stand in one place, wave, moment at a time. Receive, give, savor, spend, inspire, respire. Left foot, right foot. This is a good path. Joyfully receive the gift of a perfect day.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sparrow. I could hear your companion there wanting to help claim that, like, you helped discover that poem, right?
I helped to discover the poem. I discovered the poem. Thank you so much, little dog. You're very, very helpful.
That was beautiful.
And,
as you were reading, especially at the end, I found myself, I didn't realize it for about 5 seconds. That I found myself breathing in time with your reading there at the end. that was wonderful.
Excellent. I love hearing that.
Yeah.
So because the poems begin on September 23rd, for today the book is available on Kindle for 99 cents in case there are folks who would like to read along and walk along and do their own meditations during this next season.
Awesome. So, and the title again?
The title is Morning Meander, Samhain, Samhain. And the easiest way to find it on Kindle is just search for me as an author, Sparrow F. Alden.
All right. Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your reading. Thank you for sharing your poem with us. And thanks, as always, for joining me, Sparrow.
It is always such a pleasure to see you. Have a great fundraiser. Is it time to hear about more exciting things coming up?
Thank you. Yes, it is. So we're going to do our other reading. So thank you, Sparrow, because we are joined by a second illustrious alum of Signum University, and that is Mr. Richard Rowland. I'm going to promote you, Richard. There we go. And so then you can be webcamable too there, and there we are. Hey, Richard. Oh, hang on a second. I'm not hearing you. Yeah. Looks like you're on in the maybe.
Yeah, you hear.
There you go. There we go.
Very good.
Excellent.
Very good.
How are you, Richard?
Well, I'm super well. Thank you so much for inviting me out to do this. And yeah, when you texted me about it, I was like, wait. It's at the end of September already.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah. Oh, tell me about it.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So, yeah, exactly. Well, so Richard is going to read us something quite different, and from one of the sort of other branches of Signum University, and that is the philological side. He is going to be reading a passage from The Dream of the Rood, in Anglo-Saxon and in modern English translation for the benefit of the people who have not taken an introduction to Anglo-Saxon yet. But this is a wonderful poem, and I always enjoy hearing Richard read for us. So I'm going to try to get the I'm going to try to put the text together here, so that I can put it up on screen for folks. And could you read it maybe in modern English first?
Yeah, do you want me to say a little bit about the poem?
Yeah, why don't you say a little bit about the poem, and then you can read the modern English passage.
Yeah, so the Dream of the Root is a really neat poem. It's kind of, I mean, if Beowulf wasn't Beowulf, it would be my favorite Old English poem with zero reservations. As it is, it's a very remarkable poem that I've really come to appreciate it over the years. Something that's really cool about Signum's Anglo-Saxon 101 and Intro to Anglo-Saxon class is that they actually take you through, I don't know if I have it handy, but they take you through a wonderful book called 8 Old English Poems. Which this is exciting for me because actually most Old English classes don't do that. I don't know, maybe if some of you are aware, but most of the time when you sign up to take an Old English class somewhere, they start you on chronicles and prose and sort of let's be honest, sort of the boring stuff. Now some of us enjoy the boring stuff,
right?
But definitely it's not. Why do you take Anglo-Saxon? I mean, at the end of the day, it's to read Beowulf, right? The poetry is where the real meat is. So, but Signum starts you right off with that, and I thought that was a very ambitious choice at the time. I took the class and I really enjoyed it, and this is one of the poems that really stood out to me. And I've actually recently been studying it at some length, and so when Corey reached out and asked if I wanted to read a bit of Anglo-Saxon, I said, well, hey, why don't we do The Dream of the Root? So The Dream of the Root is at least as old as the 8th century, but probably quite a bit older than that. We know it's at least as old as the 8th century because there's a really beautiful stone Anglo-Saxon cross called the Ruthvel cross that has a partial text of the poem on it. So that gives a date which I suppose is literally set in stone. It's a really beautiful piece of iconography. It was destroyed during the Reformation, but they were able to piece a good bit of it back together, and you can look it up online if you want to see the picture of what it looks like. So there's a decent chance the poem is older than this, and it is one of the main candidates that is sometimes put forward for the title of oldest work of Old English literature, along with Cadman's Hymn and a couple of other things. And there are two kinds of theories about the origins of the poem itself. The poem basically is it's a recounting, at least the first half of it is a recounting of the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, but from the perspective of the cross, as in the two pieces of wood nailed together on which he died. And so it's a really, really interesting thing because it kind of casts the role of the cross in the terms of being a thane, being basically a retainer or a supporter or a loyal servant of Jesus Christ, right? So there's these lines at the beginning, which I'll read to you in a moment, where he talks about he could have fallen down on top of Jesus' enemies and just squashed them to death, basically. Right, but he didn't do that because he had a job to do. And his job was to stand there and to stand still. And then what the second half of the poem does is tries to contextualize that for the poet himself, and one would think the poet's audience, who are mainly coming to this poem as a guide for devotion, right? So a way to meditate on the passion and sufferings of Christ in a way that will save your soul, but doing it through kind of this unique imaginative way. One of the things I think it does, which is so interesting, is that some people think it might have been composed as sort of a missionary tool that was intended to help pagan Anglo-Saxons understand where their old values could be situated within a Christian context. And so you have the old values of standing fast, standing to the end, suffering whatever has to be suffered on behalf of your Lord. But now instead of doing that in battle, we see a cross doing it on Calvary. So, yeah. So I'm going to be reading lines 24 through 56. It's not that long of a poem. It's about 156 lines. So I'm going to read lines 24 through 56. I'll read it in a translation first, and then I'll read it in the real thing. And the thing to listen for, well, I'll say that in a minute. So, okay. So the lines that came immediately before this, I'm actually going to read those I'll read the start of the poem in translation as well, just so you'll know what happened. It won't take that long. So it begins with, "Hark, Clat, I wish to tell of the best of dreams, which came to me in the middle of the night, when speech-bearers seek their rest. It seemed to me that I saw a wondrous tree suspended on the air, surrounded by light of beams," and the idea is beama, right? A beam, which means like a beam of like a beam of wood, right? It's one of the names of the tree. "Of beams the brightest. All that side was covered with gold. Precious jewels shone forth, fair over the surface of the earth, and likewise there were 5 above the crossbeam. I beheld there all the angels of the Lord, those fair from the foundation of the world. Nor was that indeed any criminal's gallows, but there they kept watch, blessed spirits, men over the earth, and all of this famous creation. Rare and marvelous was the victory tree, and I, guilty with sins, wounded all over with evils. I saw the tree of wonder worshipfully vested, shining with joy, adorned with gold. Precious jewels had covered honorably the ruler's tree. Nevertheless, I could see through that gold the evidence of a previous and wretched combat, where it first started to sweat and bleed from its right side. I was all with sorrow afflicted, afraid, because of the fair vision. I saw that noble sign changed in garments and colors. At times it was with liquid moistened, drenched with flowing sweat and blood, and at other times with treasures adorned." So that's the beginning of the vision. He sees the cross, and it's sort of, he has a double vision that sort of, maybe you could say is the double meaning of the cross, like triumphant,
right,
adorned with gold and jewels, and then a place where, an instrument of torture and death, right? And so he's stuck there between that, and he's in wonder, and that's when the tree begins to speak. "Nevertheless, I, lying there a long time, beheld sad-minded the Saviour's tree, until I heard that it spoke. The best of woods began to speak these words. It was long ago, though I remembered still, that I was hewn down at the holt's end, removed from my stump. Strong enemies took me from there, made me into an awful spectacle, and commanded me to raise up their criminals. They bore me there, men on shoulders, until they set me atop a mountain. Many fiends fastened me there. I saw then the Lord of mankind hastening with great courage that he might mount up upon me. There I did not dare to go beyond the Lord's word, to budge or break. I saw the earth's surface begin to quake. Even though I might have felled all of those enemies, nevertheless I stood fast." And it's interesting that all throughout this poem, Christ's actions on the cross are seen as entirely willing, right? Christ is literally running, eager to mount up. The terminology that's used for him here is that of basically like a Germanic warrior spoiling for a fight. And he's portrayed as being totally in command of what takes place on the cross all throughout. And this is actually, sometimes people are like, oh, this is a new idea that the poet is introducing, and it's not really the case. This is a very old Christian idea. It's the whole theme of John's Gospel. John chapter 12, Christ says, and I, if I be lifted up, will draw all men unto me, right? So there's this idea that it's this, lifting up can mean to raise somebody up on a cross, but it can also mean to glorify them, right? They stripped the young warrior, he who was God Almighty, strong and resolute. He mounted on the gallows high, valiant in the sight of many, when he would ransom mankind. I shook when the warrior embraced me, nor dared I to bow in any direction towards the ground. I had to stand fast. The rood was raised. I exalted, and the word can mean I raised up or I exalted, right? So there's that double meaning again. I exalted the mighty King, heaven's Lord. I did not dare to bend. They pierced me with dark nails, scars easily seen in me, evil, open wounds. Nor dared I to harm any one of them. They besmirched me, both of us together. I was streaming all over with blood, drenched from that man's sides, since he had his spirit sent forth. Much have I on that mountain tasted of an evil fate. I saw the war bands of God violently humiliated. Dark clouds closed over the ruler's corpse. Over shining splendor shadow went forth, dark under sky. All creation wept, bewailing the king's fall. Christ was on the cross. So that's up to line 56 of the poem, which is only halfway through it. So I'm going to read 24 through 56 in Old English. And the thing that I want to particularly say to listen for is going to be when I get towards the end of the reading, you're going to hear the poetry is going to tighten up and the alliteration is going to become much stronger and right at the moment of the crucifixion. So listen for that and see if you can figure out what the effect is. Right. And I will just apologize in advance to all living Anglo-Saxons who hear my American accent as I read this to you. It's not just an American accent. Unfortunately, I've been doing so much Old Norse stuff that I'm a little worried some of that's going to bleed through here, but we'll give it a go anyway. Yeah. All right, starting at line 24. Quadra ich der lichende lange huile, de heeld creo chervig, hallendes trail, offat ich gehired that heat Leoproda, ungan da word sprekan, voodoo celesta. That was Yaro you, if that Ita Yaman. That ich was a hewan hortus on ende. A styred of Stefneminum. Janaman me der stronger feundas, jo hortan him there to waffersyne, heton me heora vergas heban. Beran me der beornes on erkslum, ofat hyre me on beorg eseton, ja fastenod on me der feondos genoga. Je zag ik da freon menkynus, efstan elne mykle, that he med wolda on istigan. Der ich da ne dorsta overdryknis word, bogan offer perstan, da ich bifjan iseach, o eordan sjatas. Eala ich michte, feondas je fyllan, quadra ich fast stod. Onjurede hin da jonga halab, that was God Almighty, strong und stiefmod. Je sta he on jalgan hjärna, modig on manigra jesirve, da he world man kun lisan. Bifode ich da me se beorn imklypte, ne dorst, ich quadra bogan tueo eordan, belan tu folden sjatum, ach, ich skäld fasta standan. Rod was, ich arared, a hof ich rytni kuning, and a hof is that exalted, right? Helvana platform, hildan mene dorsta, Thurtrifan he me meteorken naglum, on me syndon da dol jesienne, opene in withlemas. Ne dorst ich hira nanugun shedan, dismeredon hie, unk butu ad gadra, ea ich was mitt blod bestämmet, begotten of das Gumen sidan he havdat his i gast onsendet. Feala ich ondan beog je biden have, orada wirda, je sech it weruda gold. Feala fenian, dystro havdon, du ringen mit voknum, wealdendes fra. Skirne skiman, skädo fordelda, one under voknum, weal eal i käft, skydon kyninges skyr, Christ was on road. All right, did that all come through?
Excellent. Yes, it did.
So I really want to point out those last few lines, really starting with Deale Thenion distro havdon boringen mit worknum wealmen descra. The meter, you can even sort of visually see where it happens, right? You have these really long hypermetrical lines, which are like, I don't know, in Anglo-Saxon poetry, hypermetrical lines always strike me as like the poet's trying to be too artsy with it, you know.
Right.
But then you get to these, but then right here at the moment of the crucifixion, right?
Right.
The lines start tightening up, they start shortening up. There's a lot more economy to the sounds and the syllables and the beats. You know, a lot more attention paid to that, and then the alliteration just gets incredibly strong. You know, the Wuring mit Worknum Wealden Shirne Shiman Sheldu Fordeoda. And I remember the first time, you know, this is the moment of the crucifixion, right? And I remember the first time I read this poem in class, it was like I could hear the nails going in. It's just very, very powerful. Mm-hmm. So yeah, The Dream of the Rood is just an amazing poem, and the next half, really, because this is just the first half, right? The next half of the poem is just remarkable, and I think really interesting in a lot of ways. So.
Yeah. I always loved The Dream of the Rood. It's it was my favorite of the short poems. I love the reversal, right? First, I mean, just the conceit of the personification of the cross, right? That the cross is aware of what it is, and that the cross, you know, rather than thinking of the cross as just like the instrument of torture, right? As if it, you know, had no role other than just to be the instrument, but to give it consciousness and to make it, you know, sort of detached, looking on the scene, seeing the glory of Christ, not wanting to hurt Christ, itself being the victim. That scene with the nails being driven into, like, you know, how the
into
cross,
us both is what he said.
Yes, into us both, right? And it's, you know, basically like there's the cross saying almost in the same words that Jesus used, like, behold the print of the nails, right? Is basically what the cross itself is saying there.
And what's interesting to me about that is two things, really. The first is that there was definitely this sense in medieval devotion that there was a sanctifying or salvific quality to meditating on the wounds of Christ, right? And so, and you see that with, like, you know, in like really extreme form with somebody like St. Francis of Assisi or something like that. But even like on a very popular form, what this poem would allow you to do is that's what the cross is doing. So you can sort of imaginatively, it's imaginatively entering into the cross's experience, which I think is just, that just blows my mind. And the second thing is that I always thought this was a totally unique feature of the Dream of the Rood, but recently in other some of my studies, I've come across some very, very similar language which exists in the Byzantine liturgical tradition. There are whole prayers to the cross. Like very often at the end of the liturgy, the cross is one of the, you know, they invoke the Mother of God and all these different saints and the intercessions of the life-giving cross. It's like the cross is praying for you, kind of a thing.
Right.
So I think the idea was maybe a little more current in the Middle Ages than I initially thought. And if anybody here is taking Anglo-Saxon and needs to do a paper, maybe this is a good paper topic. Somebody could explore it.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. And certainly, one of the things that I have delighted to see happening at Signum, most over the last several years has been the growth of our Germanic philology program and the
Yes.
all of the work in Anglo-Saxon and Old Norse that's been happening, and hoping to continue to expand, as well as, of course, the study of Germanic philology itself. And it is something that, certainly on that list of things that I didn't set out to do, and I wouldn't have guessed was happening when we were founding Signum. But the idea that, Signum could go on to help to be, a kind of sanctuary for the study of Germanic philology is an awesome thing and super rewarding.
Well, and I don't know I don't know the numbers, but my suspicion is that probably you don't get as many signups for Germanic philology classes as you do for some other things. I could be totally off base about that.
They're pretty competitive, actually.
Oh, that's good to know. I always feel like it's this great hidden treasure that we have at Signum, and I always try to tell people, because a lot of people do get really intimidated by, because you're having to learn another language, and you're not just having to learn another language, you're having to learn why another language even does the things that it does, right? So there's like sort of two layers of things going on there. But just to say a couple of things about that. One is it's really not as hard as you think it is, because there are no living speakers of these languages around today, with the exception of Icelandic.
Right.
But, there are no, so it's not, you don't have to be embarrassed because you've got an accent or you don't pronounce things exactly right or something like that. So that particular difficulty is kind of, I think, removed in this case. But also, this is also English, right? There's a reason that they put all of these things in the English department at Oxford, right? When Tolkien was there, right? Gothic and Norse and everything. Oh, it's English, So it's these things are much closer to the English that we speak today than a lot of us realize. And one of the things I thought was so cool was getting into my roots culturally, but also mainly linguistically, right? Understand, why do I say certain things the way that I say them today? If you're the sort of person who likes knowing the answer to that question, then definitely check out the philology track.
Yeah, definitely. No, I will sometimes say, as far as I know, Signum University is the only school on planet Earth that has a growing Germanic philology program.
Right. Yes.
They're shrinking everywhere else, but ours is growing, and I'm very excited about that. And I certainly hope that more and more people continue to discover that. It's such a wonderful opportunity, and it's exciting to be a part of it. Awesome. Well, thank you, Richard, very much for your contributions there, for your
Thanks so much
reading
for
and
having
explanation.
Me.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Always great to hear
All
from
right.
you.
I hope the fundraiser goes great, and we'll be tuning in all throughout this next week. So
very good. Thank you.
All right.
Okay, now before we sign off, I want to do one more drawing in honor of our Anglo-Saxon reading. We're going to give away an Anytime Audit slot for our Intro to Anglo-Saxon class, so that you too can learn to read The Dream of the Root on your own. And the winner of our drawing there is another Twitch person, Talirian 1003. That's the so if you are still watching and here with us, I hope you will send an email to donate@signumu.org. I'm not sure if that's a bot or not. I don't know. It's hard for me to tell. I'm just going by the list. So yes, if you are not a bot, then let me know. I know sometimes the ones with numbers are, but yeah. Anyway, cool. So yes, again, donate@signumu.org. Send us an email and just mention that you won our drawing, and we will get you all set up with things. Awesome, cool. Yeah, I was pretty sure that was a legit person there. Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you guys so much for joining me today. I've really enjoyed our Hobbit readings and discussions as always. Tune in for, of course, I'll be talking about the fundraising campaign as we go along during my regular broadcasts over the next couple weeks during the campaign. And we'll have several special events, of course. One traditional campaign event, which is coming up soon, next Saturday. Not this coming Saturday, but the Saturday after next, October 5th, will be my annual Lotro Marathon, where I will do a 12 to 14 hour run with my primary alt Wiggend, who is going to get to meet Hanbury Khan and see the riding of the Rohirrim this year during the marathon. So that's going to be pretty exciting. I'm looking forward to that. And of course, there's going to be the State of the University address that I've mentioned before. And that's going to be happening. People can correct me if I get the date wrong off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be on the 7th of October. Monday, October 7th is the date for the State of the University address, and I certainly encourage you to come to that and hear about all the new exciting things that are going to be happening at Signum here over the next year. For more information and to sign up for other events that we are doing, you can certainly go to signumuniversity.org/events, and you will see all of those things. And of course, to make a donation to support Signum University, you can just go to signumuniversity.org/donate. So if you just go to our homepage here, you can see, of course, here's events and things that are coming up. Just click on the donate button over here on the top right of the page, and that will bring you to our donation. This all information about the campaign. We have our gifts that we are happy to give to our donors at different thresholds to thank them for their contributions. We have the campaign events here on the page, and of course you can just click right through here to our donation page, and you can make your donation here to the annual fund. So thank you so much for joining me today, for all of your support for Signum, and I look forward to to the rest of our campaign season. Thanks very much, everybody, and I will talk to you guys soon. Bye now.